Let's talk about episode 1 of Amazon's House of David. My name is Aaron. I'm a biblical scholar. I help you read the Bible better. And I think it's time to talk about what I liked least about the first episode of Amazon's House of David, and that is its treatment of the Amalekites and of Saul's conflict with the Amalekites. For those who might not know, let's review very quickly what happens in the biblical narrative in 1 Samuel chapter 15 in Saul's conflict with the Amalekites. The prophet Samuel comes to King Saul, apropos nothing at all, and he tells Saul that he needs to commit genocide against the Amalekites. He needs to eliminate every single one as far as he can find them: men, women, children, combatants, non-combatants, animals, valuables, possessions, everything in its entirety. Saul needs to destroy them. Saul then sets about doing this, at least in part, although he does not genocide quite hard enough for Samuel's taste, and as a result, he is condemned for this, and this adds one more to the many reasons why Saul is ultimately rejected as king and replaced by David in the next chapter in the biblical narrative. But the show makes two significant unbiblical changes to the story, and I don't like either one of them, not just because they're not biblical, but they seem to be made just to make the Israelites look better and to make the story more palatable for modern audiences, which is kind of weird because this is ostensibly directed at faith-based audiences who would appreciate the Bible, maybe not. The first significant change is in the nature of the command that the prophet Samuel, ostensibly on behalf of God, delivers to King Saul. Rather than being this command to practice harem, that is this ritual mass slaughter, religiously motivated genocide that was practiced not only by ancient Israel, but by several of its surrounding neighbors. Instead of that, it's just go to war with them, defeat them, make sure you don't take any loot, and also make sure you kill King Agag. Saul is persuaded to keep some loot, and he doesn't kill King Agag right away, and he is condemned for this by Samuel. But obviously, this is a significant watering down of the story, and the only reason that I can suppose that the creators of the show did this is to make the Israelites and the God that the Israelites are supposed to be representing seem more morally acceptable in the eyes of contemporary viewers. It's not about genocide, it's just about defeating them and making sure you don't profit off it for yourself. The second significant change is in the characterization of the Amalekites themselves. The Bible has very little to say about who the Amalekites are. You can tell from biblical narratives that they're like a semi-nomadic pastoralist group who are associated with the southern regions on the southern border of traditional Israelite territory. They do come into military conflict with the Israelites on a handful of occasions, obviously in 1 Samuel 15. But prior to that, it's been a while since we've seen them. They do come into conflict. They're kind of a secondary antagonist against Gideon way back in the book of Judges, which is several centuries before this as far as the timeline is concerned. Otherwise, they haven't really been an active opponent against the people of Israel since the days of the Exodus, even more centuries before that. So they're not a major villain in the stories. They're not a recurring enemy like the Philistines are or somebody like that, and they're not normally a threat at all. And so it is kind of strange in 1 Samuel 15 when Samuel out of nowhere is like, hey, now is the time. Today is the day when you really need to go hard and genocide these people. But the show radically alters the characterization of the Amalekites. It has characters say explicitly that the Amalekites have been tormenting the people of Israel for generations. They are a clear and present threat in the show, which makes their conflict with Saul, make more sense. But then they're also characterized in inhuman terms, almost like vampires. Characters keep referring to them as blood drinkers and as cannibals. And this picture that I have right here in the background, this is the way that King Agag looks in the show. He's like this disheveled, wild creature that whispers black magic under his breath. At some point, he casts a spell, I think, on one of King Saul's daughters when he has a spare moment to do it. He's referred to explicitly as the Witch King, which is kind of fun if you're a fantasy nerd, but otherwise is kind of strange to have this link. The Bible nowhere describes the Amalekites in these terms, and so it's very noticeable to have this heavy-handed demonizing language applied to them. And of course, that makes you wonder why. And I don't think it's difficult to imagine that the answer to this is just to justify, in long retrospect, the destruction of these people. I don't like changes to the biblical story when those changes seem to exist purely for the sake of soothing the conscience of modern audiences. And unfortunately, it seems like this is actually going to be a running theme with this show. Something else that happens in the first episode is we get a very interesting characterization of Ishbaal, who is like Saul's second son after Jonathan, who's not going to inherit the throne. He's sort of portrayed as this like lazy playboy kind of figure, but it turns out he's the one in the show, not in the Bible. He's the one who convinces his father Saul to keep some of the loot from the Amalekites that Saul was supposed to destroy. And the only reason I can think that they would do this, villainize the character of Ishbaal, is because in the biblical narrative, eventually he's going to come into conflict with David. And in the biblical narrative, he's fairly innocent as far as characters are concerned. And so it's like they're trying to build in some reason why eventually it will be good for David to overcome him, David to oppose him, David perhaps to be involved in his eventual assassination. And as much as I don't like changes to the biblical narrative to soothe the conscience of contemporary audiences, what I like even least is changes to the biblical narrative to make David look like a better person. And that's what it seems like is happening here with Ishbaal.